Hello. Welcome to Hope Dementia Ministry. I'm Judy. This topic is brain health, and we'll be concentrating today on diet. So, for most people, the main goal in life is to live as long as we possibly can with this highest quality of life possible. And that means quality cognitive functioning as well as physical functioning. However, too many people really want to just be able to live however they want to live. They want to eat whatever they want to eat. They want to be as lazy as they want to be. And they want medical science to step in and come up with the magic pill that's going to create a cure for whatever ails them. But the problem is that pharmaceutical science has not really been able to give us anything that is related to brain health. On the other hand, food choices can profoundly impact the health of our brains, as can sleep and physical exercise. So, the body can't really be looked at as a grouping of separate entities. Everything is connected. Much like we can't just lose weight in one spot or another, we have to think about losing weight all over. It's all one thing. And so is taking care of our bodies. Anything that we do that is healthy for one organ of our body is probably healthy for the rest of our body. And so we need to understand the connectedness of all of our body systems. And there needs to be a fundamental shift in how we address health concerns. Instead of asking what it is and addressing symptoms, we need to ask why it is and figure out where it's coming from. So the first thing we need to look at as the cause of is what is causing disease. We know that dementia is related to many underlying chronic diseases. And by far, the main culprit that's involved with almost all diseases is inflammation. So, inflammation can lead to cancers, heart disease, autoimmune disease, diabetes, skin diseases, obesity, and brain disorders. Heart disease and diabetes, in particular, lead to dementia. So reducing inflammation in the body can reduce blood pressure and heart rate and insulin levels. And so reducing inflammation should be our number one goal. But where does inflammation come from? So the main source of inflammation in the human body is typically from the food that we eat. The gut is a crucial player in the inflammatory story. The digestive system is meant to remove the elements from what you eat and send them around to take care of the body, the useful things in what we eat. But equally important, the gut is meant to keep the bad things, the toxins, the unwanted substances from entering the bloodstream and reaching your other organs and tissues, including the brain. So the gut and the brain are intricately connected. The human microbiome is 100 trillion organisms that live in your gut. There are more non-human cells in the human body than there are human cells. And some people don't realize this, don't know about this, but this human microbiome, all these organisms in our gut, they support and they nurture every aspect of our physiology, including what goes on in the brain. When your diet doesn't support the health of this microbiome, then inflammation can develop and flourish. When inflammation that develops in the gut is passed into the bloodstream, it's carried to all the organs in the body, including the brain. So it's the job of all these trillions of gut bacteria to maintain the gut lining. So leaky gut is an issue where the lining of the gut becomes compromised and it's unable to keep these various unwanted particles from entering your circulatory system. This increases inflammation, which affects every part of the body, from your organs to joints to immunity and yes, to the brain. So with health challenges like rheumatoid arthritis, asthma, inflammatory bowel disease, celiac disease, diabetes, autism, cancer, and Alzheimer's. So there's a lot of things that can cause an unhealthy microbiome, including a diet that's high in sugar, processed foods, highly processed vegetable oils, and animal products. Also bad for your microbiome is a diet that's low in fiber. And other lots of other things can contribute as well: stress, chronic infection. But what we're really going to be looking at today is how we can shape the microbiome by what we eat. So you might say, well, what promotes a healthy microbiome? That would be probiotics and prebiotics. Most people have heard of probiotics. This is the live active yogurt cultures, the things, the organisms that are in fermented foods and drinks. Prebiotics, though, is maybe something that you haven't heard about. This is the fiber from plant food that feeds the good bacteria in our gut. So the Western diet provides, the typical Western diet provides a lot of calories, but really very little prebiotic fiber. So even though we eat a lot, our gut might think we're starving. And the gut sends information directly to the brain. So if we eat a lot of empty calories, we feel full maybe, but our gut is going to send a message to the brain saying, I'm starving. We didn't eat enough fiber. We didn't eat enough to feed the microbiome. So the brain gets the message, I need more food. And so that tends to make us continue to eat. And, overeating is going to lead to obesity and a lot of these other chronic illnesses. So fiber seems to be the big key. So the best thing you can do for your entire body overall is eat more fiber. Now, where is fiber found? Well, it's only found in one place, and that is whole plant food. Processed foods have less fiber. So plant foods that are processed have less fiber than whole foods. And animal-based foods have no fiber at all. When you think about animals, animals have bones that hold up the flesh. They have a skeletal structure. Plants have fiber. They don't have bones to hold them up. They have fiber built in, and that's where we get our fiber from. So increasing your fiber intake can protect from heart disease, diabetes, some cancers and obesity, and they can also help protect you from dementia. So humans were meant to eat a lot of fiber, and we know this because humans have a long digestive system. So the gut takes a long time to process all the nutrients out of your food. Carnivores, on the other hand, have a short digestive system because they are not meant to eat a lot of fiber. So the first thing that everyone can do to improve your health is start eating more fruits and vegetables. Now, we hear a lot about different components in our foods. And the first thing that we talk about is carbohydrates. And it's important to understand the different types of carbohydrates. There are simple carbohydrates, and that's what we need to cut from our diet. Because simple carbohydrates, whether it's plain sugar or whether it's highly refined flours, they change into sugar in our system very quickly. And sugar is actually an anti-nutrient. Back in the 70s and 80s, we used to hear a lot about, you know, neutral calories or empty calories, but actually sugar works as an anti-nutrient. It can deplete the body of nutrients. Added sugar is what we have to cut from our diets. When you read a food label, that you have to understand that there are some natural sugars in different foods, and natural sugar, like in fruits, is okay because you're getting, when you're eating a whole fruit, you're getting all the fiber that goes along with it. And so that helps the sugar to break down and be absorbed into your system more slowly. It's the added sugar that's added for flavor or scientifically to get us addicted to whatever this food is. It's those sugars that don't need breaking down. They just easily are absorbed into your bloodstream. So the fiber is what helps keep that absorption of sugar slowed so that it doesn't spike very quickly. So we want to cut the added sugar in order to be more healthy. And sugar itself is not the only culprit. There's the highly processed grain. So this is anything that has flour, bread, crackers, a lot of chips, you know, different kinds of things that are processed grains. Because this processing takes all of the fiber out and actually takes a lot of the nutrients out as well. So highly processed flours are almost pure carbs. So carbs with no fiber converts to sugar in your bloodstream. And another thing that a lot of people have been very, very concerned about lately is gluten. Gluten is a protein that is in wheat, barley, rye, some oats. So you're getting that in a lot of your bread products. It's what causes the chewy consistency that we enjoy from bread. But people who are, say, have celiac disease, they are actually allergic to gluten. They cannot have gluten in their diet, or it's highly inflammatory to their gut. But more and more people they're discovering are actually sensitive to gluten. So gluten can be highly inflammatory and harmful to gut health. So it's important to get checked. You can get a blood test that can check whether you're sensitive to gluten or not. If you're not sensitive to gluten, then you can go forward eating wheat and grain products, but they have to be the whole grain. If you are sensitive to gluten, then it's something that would be important to start cutting out of your diet. So because all carbohydrates can convert to sugar in your bloodstream, then high levels of sugar in your blood cause this spike in insulin. Insulin is the protein carrier that your pancreas produces, and it runs through the bloodstream and it picks up all of the glucose molecules and it ushers them into the cells. But insulin is meant to rise periodically and to come back down. But many of us are used to eating and snacking all day long. Our diet is very high in simple carbohydrates, so we're consuming this on a constant basis. That means the blood glucose level is high on a constant basis, means the insulin is present on a much more constant basis, and this causes insulin resistance in the cells. The insulin can't do its job properly, so the glucose builds up. And then we know that diabetes is directly related to Alzheimer's disease and other dementias. So this is where the chronic illness of diabetes comes into play. Alzheimer's disease even being called type 3 diabetes because the brain is becoming insulin resistant and it can't use the glucose for energy. And if the brain has no source of energy, then the cells begin to die. So let's look at healthy carbohydrates and how do we know what a healthy carbohydrate would be? And a good way to determine that is by looking at the fiber content on your food label, understanding what has fiber and what doesn't. So I have a PowerPoint that I want to share with you at this point. Let me go to that. Oops. Okay, so our typical food label, most of us are familiar with looking for fat content, and we pretty much understand saturated fat is a poor source of fat coming from red meat and chicken skin and whole fat dairy products, but also coconut oil and palm oil are high in saturated fat. Trans fat, worst kind of fat. We don't want trans fat in our diet, but it is still in a lot of processed foods. It's like the shortening, the margarine, stick margarine. It is liquid oil that has gone through a process of hydrogenization so that it's solid at room temperature. Trans fats need to be cut. That's the highest marker for heart disease. So trans fats, saturated fats, what we're looking for in our fat content would be the monounsaturated and the polyunsaturated. These are things found in nuts and avocado and olive oil and seeds and fatty fish. So when we're looking at fat content, it matters what kind of fat. And also a lot of us are used to looking at sugar content. An adult should really not have more than 30 grams of sugar a day. Some breakfast cereals have 30 grams of sugar in a serving. So, you know, we have to be careful about what we're putting in. Protein is another thing that a lot of people look at and are concerned about, and we don't think we get enough protein, but actually, you know, we should really be consuming around 50 grams of protein a day, and that should not be difficult to achieve. Fiber is something that a lot of people just sort of overlook, but this is what we want to concentrate on here. Adults should consume between 25 and 30 grams of fiber per day. There's different types of fiber. There's the soluble, which dissolves in water, and this is what helps us lower cholesterol, things like oatmeal. There's insoluble fiber, which is it's to bulk up in your digestive system. This would be the things like the bran, the stuff that's often typically removed from the grain, that is insoluble. And then fermentable fiber is it can be in both categories, but this is the stuff that's good for the bacteria that lives in your digestive tract. So I want to introduce you, if you're not familiar with the Traffic Light Guide to Nutrition, this is something that I want you to kind of get into your mind. There's 3 different categories of food. There's green light food, which means you can enjoy it freely, you can eat it every day because it's typically low in fat, sugar, and calories. There is yellow light food, which you should be more cautious about. You can have it now and then, but it's typically higher in fat, sugar, and calories. And then there's red light foods. These are the things that you really shouldn't be eating because it's high in fat, sugar, and calories, and typically low in fiber. So thinking about green means go, red means stop. But I want to give you an idea of how to use this when we're talking about the fiber content. If the fiber factor, and we're going to talk about that on the next slide, if the fiber factor is from a 1 to a 5, that means it's something you can eat freely. If your fiber factor works out to be between 6 and 10, you really shouldn't have it more than once a day. And if your fiber factor is above 11, this is a food you should not be eating. Once in a while is okay, but not with any frequency. Okay, so let's give an example of understanding the fiber factor. So in the first example here, what we're doing is we're looking at the total carbohydrates in a serving and the total amount of fiber in a serving. And then we're dividing those carbohydrates by the grams of fiber. Okay, so in the first example, the slice of bread, here we have a regular slice of bread, and this is wheat bread. This is not even just like white Wonder Bread or something. It has 16 grams of carbohydrates in a slice, but it only has 1 gram of fiber. So when you divide 16 by 1, you get a fiber factor of 16. So going back here, we know that with a fiber factor above 11, this is not what we should be eating. But if we look over here, this is an example of a high fiber, 100% whole grain bread. So it still has 16 grams of carbs, but it also has 4 grams of fiber. All the bran and the fiber has not been processed out of this flour. And so that gives us a fiber factor of 4. 16 grams of carbs divided by 4 grams of fiber gives us a fiber factor of 4, which puts this in the green light category. That means you can eat this bread every day. Here's a pasta example. The first one is a rice pasta, 32 grams of carbs, but only 1 gram of fiber, which puts us in a 32 fiber factor range, which is way out of the red zone even. But here is a whole wheat, 100% whole wheat pasta, 41 grams of carbs. So it's got more carbs, but it has way more fiber. And so that puts our fiber factor at an 8, which means that this is something you can have. You can have your plate of spaghetti for dinner, as long as the rest of your diet is in the lower range. This fits well into the something that you could have on a daily basis. And there are ways that you can lower the total fiber factor of your dish of spaghetti if you're putting like lots of vegetables and things that are higher in fiber into the sauce that goes onto it. So these are just some typical food nutrition labels that I want to show you so you know what I'm talking about where you look. So here says total carbohydrates, 6 grams. This is a bag of raw almonds. So 6 grams of carbohydrates in a serving, but you can see there's 3 grams of fiber in that. So 6 divided by 3 comes to a 2. We have a fiber factor of 2 for raw almonds. You can eat raw almonds all day long. This is a box of Cheerios. Now this is the plain Cheerios. So you can see just 1 gram of sugar, but he goes, oh, well, that's great. There's only 1 gram of sugar. But when we look, there's 20 grams of carbs, 3 grams of fiber. It comes to a 6.6. So this is not something you want to snack on all day long. If you want to have your bowl of cereal, it's not too much above that 5, which is your level for your green light food. And here is something called Good Seed bread. This has 13 grams of carbohydrates in a serving, in a slice, with 3 grams of fiber, which brings you to a 4.3. This is a bread that you can eat every day. It's very tasty. It's made with whole grain wheat flour. Okay, this is on the left here, the purple is Special K cereal. Here under total carbs, we see 36 grams of carbs. Here we see 3 grams of fiber. That's a 12, so that is above, we think about Special K, oh, that's a healthy cereal, but it's actually pretty high in sugar. There's 13 grams of sugar, and here we see that added line that says added grams of sugar. So there's 11 grams of added sugar here in this 1 serving of cereal. And the problem with breakfast cereal is that we typically eat way more than the 1 serving size. So we're actually getting more of the things we don't want. This is the label of a blueberry bagel. So here's total carbohydrates, 55 grams of carbohydrates and only 2 grams of fiber in one of these bagels. Your bagel is at 27.5, way, 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 way above your 11. This is an example of a snack. These are gluten-free pretzels. They're very, very tasty, but they have no fiber at all. They are made with things like tapioca starch and potato starch and just all starches. There's no fiber whatsoever in them. They're going for the no gluten, so they're using not grain items, and so you don't have that fiber that's built in. Okay, so here's some more natural vegetable. You can see why vegetables are ranked so high on this nutrition plan, because here, this is a bag of carrots. So there's 8 grams of carbohydrates in a 3-ounce serving of carrots, 2 grams of fiber. That gives you a fiber factor of 4. And here is fresh spinach. There's 5 grams of carbohydrates in, this is a whole container of spinach, 3 grams of fiber. It's less than a 2. You can eat as much spinach as you can possibly eat. And then this is an example of tomatoes. Actually, canned tomatoes are healthier for you than raw tomatoes even, because something in the cooking process actually releases more of the nutrients that are in them. But it's a fiber factor of 5, so you can freely eat tomatoes, whether you're making soup or spaghetti sauce or whatever. Hummus is another great thing to eat. It's got a fiber factor of 4, but what do we eat? What do we dip in hummus? Well, a lot of us typically dip like tortilla chips or something. Here's an example of tortilla chips. there is 19 grams of carbohydrates in a serving and only 1 gram of fiber. So even if you're eating it with a food that's a factor of 4, you're still coming out with a total of 12 with this snack. But if you were to switch up your chips and go with something like this is Beanfield's black bean chips. They're very, very tasty. 16 grams of carbs and 4 grams of fiber. So this is a fiber factor of 4, something you can eat freely. Here's another way to combine things to bring the fiber factor down in your food. On the right-hand side here is the label for medjool dates. I don't know if you've ever tried these. They are so good, but they're quite sweet. They have 30 grams of sugar, but this includes no added sugar. This is all natural sugar, but 4 grams of fiber, which puts them at an 8.25 for your fiber factor, which would mean something that you should limit unless you pair your dates with something like a handful of walnuts, which is what we have shown here on the left, which has a fiber factor of 2, total carbohydrates of 4, total fiber of 2, 4 divided by 2 is 2. And so when you eat these in combination, you can come up with a snack that it has a 5 rating on our fiber factor. So that would be a green light food. Eating foods in combination, as long as they're going into your stomach together and your gut is processing all of this together, you can, pad that sugar content in some of those items that are a little bit higher in the natural sugar. Here is a combination that I like to enjoy every morning. This is bran flakes. We have a fiber factor of 4 because there's 29 grams of carbs, but 7 grams of fiber in a serving. This is almonds, shaved almonds. I like to add a good amount of that to my bowl of cereal. That is a fiber factor of 2. 6 grams of carbs divided by 3 grams of fiber gives you a factor of 2. And then I sprinkle on, for a special treat, some dried cranberries. Now, they do have sugar added, but there's fiber in them. So even in their combination, they have a fiber factor of 11. But since I'm only sprinkling a few on and I'm not just eating the whole bag, I can enjoy that within the range of a green light food. Things like salsa. I know, people are concerned about what do I snack on, what do I eat? But most salsas are green light food. Here we have, total carbs of only 4 in a serving. So, even though it doesn't really have a lot of fiber in it, that's still only at a 4. So you can freely eat most salsas. And this is even one that has sugar added to it. It's a mango salsa. If you go with a tomato-based salsa, you typically don't have any sugar in there at all. Popcorn is a a green light food. Dark chocolate, as long as it is 70% cacao or above, is a green light food. There's a lot of fiber in it. So a serving of 11 grams of carbohydrates, there's 3 grams of fiber. That brings us down to a 3.6. You can eat your dark chocolate every day as long as it's above 70%. But if you take your dark chocolate and you dip your cherries or your strawberries or some other kinds of things, or drizzle it on popcorn, it can be a really decadent treat and you don't feel like you're missing out on anything. Some other good sources of fiber to add to your diet: garbanzo beans, that's what hummus is made out of. They're great on salads, they're great in soups, they're great just to snack on by themselves. My grandson just loves, I pour a plate of these out and he just chows down on them. Black beans are another great thing to add to soups and pastas and things like that. They don't have any kind of intense flavor, but they certainly add extra fiber to your meal. Chia seed is something, if you're not familiar with chia seed, I would check it out. As you can see, only 4 grams of total carbs in a serving, but there's 4 grams of fiber in that. So it's a fiber factor of 1. You can freely add chia seed to all kinds of things to add fiber, to bring up the fiber content. You do need to hydrate it though. So like if you're going to add it to a smoothie, I put it in my smoothies all the time, but you don't want to just add the dry seeds into your smoothie. You want to add them to water and let them sit overnight, and they will swell up, and it's almost becomes like a gelatinous substance. The more seed you put into it, the thicker it will be. If you put less in there, it would be runnier, but you don't remove the water from it. Then you just add that, whether you're going to add it to soup or you're going to add it to baked goods or your smoothie. Some people actually eat it as a pudding, but I try not to, it's not very tasty without some kind of sweetener in it. So I try to add it to other things so that I don't have to add sweetener to something. When you're shopping, you want to look for things. Now, this carb balance, that will alert you to the fact that they're balancing the carbs that are in it by adding extra fiber to it. So you can see over here, total carbohydrates for these little street taco tortillas, whole wheat tortillas, 20 grams of carbs, but there's 17 grams of fiber. They add lots of extra fiber to this. So this is a wonderful thing. I really like bread. And I use this kind of, they're small, they're only about 6 inches around. And so I pop them in the toaster and I spread hummus on them and then fresh spinach leaves and kind of eat it a little sandwich like that. You can actually make tacos with them. But they're really tasty, they're very good flavor, and it's an excellent source of getting your fiber. Other things, bean sprouts, they're great in soups and sauces. There's hardly any carbs in them at all, so it's something that you can add to, any kind of dishes that you're making, especially some kind of an Asian style dish. So what foods have no fiber? Typically animal products, and that would be like, this is turkey breast, has no fiber. Cheese, and they have no fiber, and so also low in carbohydrates, as you can see, the cheese and the meat. But when we look here on total carbohydrates, this is yogurt, and this is Greek yogurt. This is plain, no sugar added, and we can see on the label it says total sugar is 8 grams of sugar for the yogurt. And then it adds the line including 0 grams of added sugars. That's where the added sugar is going to come in. So if this was a flavored sweetened yogurt, you would see a distinction here of how much extra sugar was added. But milk has natural sugar in it. That's what this is about. This one doesn't show that it doesn't have the 0, but so, that's where you can understand the meat and dairy don't have fiber in them. And so then this is just a few other standard, this is Kix cereal. I always thought, oh, this is low sugar, so it's good but it actually comes out to a 13.5 because there just really isn't much fiber in it at all. This was our pretzel example with the no fiber. Mac and cheese, Kraft mac and cheese. Who doesn't love that? We grew up on that. I fed my kids that. My grandkids like it. But you can see it's only 2 grams of fiber to 48 grams of carbohydrates. That's a 24. That is not something we should be eating. And here's our example of the bagel, with 55 grams of carbs. And if you are a Panera bagel person, you're going to want to check their nutritional labels. There's one bagel that is, I can't remember what it's called, but it's got a bit of fiber in it, and it brings you into the yellow zone, but it's the only one. There's some of their bagels have 60 some grams of carbs in it with 1 or 2 grams of fiber. So, that is not the kind of bread we should be eating. So that was just an idea for you of how to start figuring out which of your carbs are you eating that are healthy. And so going through it that way, trying to figure out, taking your total carbs, dividing that amount of fiber. If you're eating something that has only 1 or 2 grams of fiber and you got lots of carbs in it, that's something that you want to stay away from. So the other thing that we want to talk about is fats. mentioned in the beginning about the saturated fats and trans fats. We know the trans fats are the bad ones. It's the fat that is solid at room temperature. That's the kind of thing that can be clogging for your arteries, and we want to avoid that. So what kind of fats should we be looking for? What are healthy fats? Now that would be your plant sources, things like tree nuts, walnuts, pecans, Brazil nuts, almonds, the things that grow on trees. Peanuts fit into this category, but peanuts are something separate. That's why there's the designation of tree nuts. Peanuts grow in the ground, other things grow on trees, but they still have that same breakdown and health benefits. Seeds are the other thing that we want to really look at and concentrate on adding into our diet. Chia seeds, sesame seeds, sunflower, pumpkin. These are all best to consume in their raw state. Most of the nuts that are roasted in highly processed fats and oils that are not good for us. They're highly inflammatory. And so if you can get yourself into the raw or dry roasted would be a good option. Also coconut, avocado, olives, olive oil, those are the good sources of fat. And when we think about fats, there are essential fatty acids. There's omega-3, omega-6, and omega-9. Omega-9 our body produces. We don't really have to worry about getting that in our diet. But the omega-6 and the omega-3 are essential fatty acids that we have to consume through our diet. The Western diet is full of highly processed oils, and that's where we get most of our omega-6. And our diets are very, very high in omega-6 fatty acids. And when your diet is high in the omega-6 and low in omega-3, you get a very inflammatory response. We think of seed oils. So we're thinking about things that are like corn oil, soybean, cottonseed, peanut, sunflower seed oils. These oils are highly processed. They are heated to very, very high temperatures so that they're clear and they are generally odorless. That's kind of what we want because we want to use them in cooking and we don't want the flavor that goes along with them. But when you do that with these oils, you change the molecular structure. And that's what makes them inflammatory to the human body. If you're using an oil, it should be unrefined, unprocessed, like your olive oil, extra virgin olive oil. You can get 100% olive oil that's been highly processed and so it has no odor, but you're not getting the benefits of it then. That has the high processing is actually bad for the human body. So we want to stick with oils that are the virgin process, the first press, unrefined. And when we think about the omega-3 and the omega-6, we should be getting about an equal amount of each one of those in our diet. But the typical Western diet is extremely high in omega-6, like 16 parts of omega-6 compared to about 1 part of omega-3. So the omega-3 is the thing that we get in like the fatty fish and like I said, these nuts and olives and things like that. The chia seed, actually of all the plant sources of omega-3 is the highest. So that's why, you know, I would suggest that you pick up some chia seed and get used to doing some things with it and do a little bit of experimenting with it and try to work that into your diet on a regular basis. Okay, so something else I want to mention diet-wise is most of you have probably heard of the keto diet. And what that diet is, it concentrates on fat being where the energy source is for the cells. So, you know, our cells use glucose for energy, which is what we get from carbohydrates. but the ketogenic nutrition looks at using ketones, which is what the liver produces when the diet is high in fat and extremely low in carbs. So this is kind of a fad. Some people use it. My son uses it, I think, incorrectly. He uses it to lose weight quickly, jumpstart, something like that. But a lot of people, you see them, they're eating bacon and butter and a lot of cheese and high fat or full fat dairy products. So they're getting a lot of this fat from animal sources as opposed to the healthy fats that are coming from plant sources. So it would be much better if you were thinking about a keto diet to think about, your green leafy vegetables. You don't eat so many fruits because fruits tend to be higher in carbs, but you can eat a lot of the green leafy vegetables and lean meats, and then the healthy fats, the avocado, the olive oil, the nuts, and things like that. There was a time when, probably in the 70s, science showed that sugar was actually poisonous for the body, and the sugar industry, freaked out about that and really started campaigning to support sugar, that sugar is okay. Sugar, this is where we get our idea of empty calories. But they had to vilify something, and so they sought to vilify fat. And that sort of was easy for us to buy. Fat makes you fat. And so, like when I was growing up, I thought sugar were empty calories. As long as I wasn't overweight, I could eat sugar, but I didn't eat nuts. I didn't eat animal sources of fat. I was very careful about, never ate avocados because they're very high in fat. And so I was very, very low fat of all kinds. But I was never overweight, but I was gaining slowly, and it was always very, very hard to ever lose anything. And so that's where, when the keto diet came in, the reason that you lose weight quickly when you're on the keto diet is because the carbs are gone. And when the carbs are gone, insulin is also gone. The body cannot burn fat in the presence of insulin. And so when we think about someone who is overweight and diabetic and maybe even taking insulin, but they have a hard time losing weight, and that's because the presence of insulin. The blood sugar is so high from eating carbs. The blood sugar is high, insulin is high to try to bring the blood sugar down, but because that insulin level is high, you can't burn the fat. So for someone who's dealing with diabetes, the keto diet might be a way to jumpstart that fat burn and make you able to lose weight. But it's not necessarily a way that you should try to live forever. It's much better to do something that is more modified than that. And, that brings back to like the Mediterranean diet, which is, lean meats and fish and lots of fruits and vegetables and olive oil and nuts and that kind of thing is better. But if you're really looking for that drastic reduction of insulin, the keto diet is the way that they do that. Again, any of these things you should be working with your doctor or a nutritionist or someone that understands what you're eating and what your medications are, because if you drastically change the way you eat, that may change what medications you need to be on and as well. So when we think about, in a summary of this whole eating thing, what should we do? The first thing we have to do is cut our sugar consumption level. That means the raw sugars, the candy, the baked goods, the pies, cookies, pudding, yogurt. There's so many things we don't realize are super high in sugar. But if you start reading your labels and you really concentrate on that, you'll see how much sugar you're probably eating. The other thing that you really have to work on is cutting the processed foods, the highly processed flours, which would be in your Ritz crackers and your bread and those kinds of things. Any of the baked products that you get, even if you're going for SnackWells or something like that, the things that are low fat, that is very misleading because though it's low in fat, they typically add more in sugar to, you know, counterbalance that whole flavor issue. So you really have to read your food labels. You want to eat less processed foods. You want to shop in the produce aisle, the dairy, the meat. Those are on the outside of the grocery store. You want to kind of skip all those center aisles that are so full of processed foods. Yeah, maybe the canned vegetable aisle, you know, where you get your beans and things like that. There's certainly things that, but all the processed convenience foods, those often have too many nutrients actually processed out of them. So by cutting sugar, cutting processed foods, adding more whole foods, more fruits and vegetables where you're going to be getting those extra nutrients, nuts, seeds, incorporating those, you know, if it's not something that you really enjoy eating, maybe you can add it to a smoothie. I make smoothies with my grandkids all the time, and they would never eat spinach, but they love putting it into the blender and blend it up, and you can't even taste it in there. You can cram a lot of spinach in a smoothie and not even be able to taste it. But once you stop eating so much sugar, your palate can change as well, and so your tastes can change. You know, I used to eat like sugared applesauce, sugared fruit, those kinds of things. But since I don't eat sugar now, I think unsweetened applesauce is terribly good. I think it tastes very sweet. I've never had a sour plum or a sour grape or a sour orange in years because I don't consume a lot of sugar. So those things taste sweet to me. Another thing I want to mention about animal products is that science is telling us that the Western diet is, you know, we are over consuming the animal products, the dairy products, the eggs, and there's a lot of evidence that the protein in dairy can be pro-cancerous. You know, we look at, it's not just heart disease and diabetes that are chronic diseases, but a lot of cancers are caused by our poor diets as well. And so casein is the protein in dairy products. And if you have a very high level of casein in your diet, that could be pro-cancerous for people who are predisposed to that. So that might be a reason that you want to cut back on that. But all the animal fats can lead to clogging arteries and causing heart disease. But actually, they've shown that the arteries in the brain can also become clogged. And inflammation goes along with this. When I have a pro-inflammatory diet, if we're suffering from leaky gut, all of our blood vessels become inflamed. And I go more into this in the inflammation topic, but I just want to mention it here. And the inflamed arteries and veins are the ones that become sticky. And so then these other plaques can get caught more rather than being able to flow through. So it is all related. There's no way you can say that you know, this is not related to this. They're all related together. So if you can cut down on animal products, that is better for the human body. If you are a dedicated meat eater and you don't think you can give up meat, then think of meat as a condiment. When you look at your plate, half of your plate should be fruits and vegetables. A quarter of your plate should be whole grains, you know, unrefined whole grains. That last quarter of your plate should be where you have your fats and your lean meat and those kinds of things. So there, that's kind of how the balance goes. And so people think, well, what about the protein? We already mentioned you don't need quite as much protein as people have thought, but there are lots of plant sources of protein. Soy products are very full of protein, and they, you know, whether it's tofu or tempeh or edamame, those are all good sources. There's different ways to eat them. The edamame is just, you know, the little green soy beans. They're very tasty. They kind of look like peas or lima beans. They're great on salad. They're great just plain. But tofu is a great thing if you learn how to cook it right, if you learn what to do with it. If you don't know what to do with it, you're going to come up with some poor results. But get on the internet and read some recommendations. You know, you buy a tofu press so you can get all the water pressed out of it. But then other things, lentils, chickpeas, of course, all of our nuts we've talked about. Quinoa is a great, and it's gluten-free if you have a gluten issue. Brown rice as well is gluten-free. Beans and brown rice, oatmeal has protein, chia seeds and all kinds of other seeds are great for protein. But then there's also protein in broccoli and mushrooms and kale. So, you know, it's your animal foods are not the only sources for your protein. You just have to be a little more diligent about where it's coming from and thinking about whole foods that are working into your diet. I do also want to mention about supplements. Some people are big into supplements, but the most that I read and the you know, official people talking about supplements is that they cost a lot and you have no guarantees that they're going to do any of the things that they say they're going to do. They're not regulated. They're not something that goes through the FDA. And so you just have no way of knowing what's in them. There are some designations, some organizations that are trying to regulate supplements, but it's really hard to know whether you can trust what you're reading on the labels. But there are some times when you might need supplements. The omega-3 is, you know, we're quite familiar with. A lot of people take fish oil supplements, they take the capsules, but there have been a lot of studies done that have shown that actually eating the fish is a better way to get your omega-3 than to take the supplements. They did a study that where half of the study group took the fish supplements and half of the study group ate the actual fish, and the body used it better eating the whole food. That's generally the way it is. Our body absorbs the nutrients and things better through the foods that we're eating than if we just take them in pill form. Probiotics and prebiotics, it's the same thing. You know, you can get supplements of both of those, but it's really better to eat the whole foods. Like even the probiotics is your yogurt, kefir, kombucha, tempeh, even sourdough bread. The things that are fermented have the good beneficial bacterias. The prebiotic is the plant food fiber that these bacteria eat, but chicory root, onions, oatmeal, wheat bran, asparagus, bananas, especially green bananas, are very high in those kinds of fibers. So it's not like they're impossible to come by in your diet. Some things that are things like vitamin B12. That is something that we find in eggs and meat and seafood, and so you might not be getting enough if you, especially if you really try to dedicate yourself to meatless days or meatless weeks, or if you really go to a purely vegan diet, you might not be getting enough vitamin B12. You might need a supplement for that. If that is the choice that you decide to make, you might want to consult with your nutritionist or your primary care doctor, and maybe you need a supplement for that. It would be best to go by their recommendation rather than just picking up something at the grocery store. Vitamin D is another thing that we talk about a lot. That is available in things like seafood and eggs and mushrooms and soy foods. But if those are not things that are in your diet and you're not getting sunlight, and you're not allowing your body to produce its own vitamin D, you might be extremely low. People can exhibit dementia type symptoms when their vitamin D level is extremely low. So that's something that is important to monitor and get checked out. Some people might need a supplement of that. They might not be able to get enough in their diet of that. But for the most part, it really is best to get your supplements, your nutrients from your food. And the best rule of thumb is to eat a wide variety of colorful fruits and vegetables. The redder the red pepper, the darker green the cauliflower or the broccoli. Cauliflower, I know, is a white food, but it's good for you. Cauliflower, onion, garlic, those are white foods that are good, as opposed to white rice, white potatoes. Sweet potatoes are better than white potatoes. So think colorful. Beets are excellent health food, whether it's you're drinking beet juice or you're cooking beets. So you want colorful, wide variety of foods. Think things in the cruciferous family, the kale, spinach, Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, broccoli. Those are some of the best vegetables that you can choose. But a variety is what keeps you going. You get tired if you're going to have to eat broccoli every day. You might not want to face that. But if you mix in all these other kinds with it, your diet can be very satisfying and very healthy at the same time. So I hope that answers some questions for you about what is brain healthy. It's all over health. The better we can do with the things that we have control over, the more likely we are to push off this whole idea of developing dementia. If you already feel that you have some issues going on, take a look at your diet. What are you eating? Are there ways that you can make some improvements? And if we can really be dedicated to that, you can clear up a lot of brain fog. In the inflammation topic, I talk a lot about my story with fibromyalgia and the brain fog that I was suffering from that, how my diet was not on track with this. And so when I started doing the research about brain health diet, I thought, this is applying to me because I have so much inflammation. And so I incorporated that into my lifestyle. And this is, what I follow now. And I feel much better. I don't have the brain fog. I'm not taking some expensive supplement. I'm just eating much better, cut out the sugar, add a lot more fiber. And it's really made an improvement in my life. There on the Hope Dementia Ministry website, there is a video on the video information page that tells the story about inflammation and my whole issue with fibromyalgia. Also check out the second half of this topic, brain health, that will concentrate on sleep and on physical exercise, and that will round out the three legs of the stool that we need for stability for brain health. So check those out as well. All right, thank you so much for joining.